welcome to the webinar we're having here today on the Medallion warehouse, its strategy and approach using ER Studio. Presenting today will be Jamie Knowles, our senior product manager, and my name's Tim, and I'm a solutions architect on the ER Studio suite of tools. With that, I think I'll turn it over to Jamie, and once again, housekeeping, make sure you ask those questions.
Very
Thanks,
good.
Jamie.
Thanks, Tim. Great. Welcome to the webinar. I'll switch my camera off now. I just want to say hi to everybody to save some bandwidth. So today we're going to talk about Medallion warehouse design using ER Studio. So I guess before we sort of get going, let's talk about what is a Medallion architecture. So I think hopefully you've all seen this sort of picture on the screen. So we want to go from a traditional data lake where we're creating maybe in a meta store a whole bunch of reports and analyses on our data, and we want to go for something a little bit more structured that's going to be more manageable. Okay, so we want to be able to create pools of cleansed reusable information, and we want the quality of our data in there to be improved. So a single source for the truth of key data. We want governance to be a key part of this to make sure the data that we've got in there, and we want it to be performant as we're coming up with requests for new data sets, new outputs. We can react to those requirements quickly. So lots of good benefits. The structure of a Medallion warehouse is traditionally, as we've got on the screen here. So left-hand side, we've got a whole bunch of data sources. This might be traditional relational databases from our systems. There's probably going to be a lake of data in all sorts of files and formats. And we want to bring all that data into our Medallion lakehouse so that we can then do some meaningful analyses on it. So we've got three layers: bronze, silver, and gold. The bronze layer is equivalent to a staging layer in other warehouse approaches. The silver layer is where we've got a well-structured set of data that's filtered and cleaned and ready to go. And then the gold layer is going to be aligned with our output tools. So maybe using star schemas and the sort of Kimball approach to warehousing. Many people may look at this and say, hey, this looks to me like an Inman style traditional data warehouse, and you'd be right. And we're going to talk a lot about the silver layer and the structure of that. Some may say, well, we could do this and also apply a data vault approach to the silver layer. That's absolutely fine. We'll talk a little bit about that later on. So all of these approaches are absolutely correct. How do we get there? What is the most important thing in this? We need a well-architected design. So most of the presentation going forward is really talking about how we use ER Studio to create a design for our warehouse or lakehouse and include the notion of architecture. Okay, right. So those of you who don't know ER Studio, what is it? It's a tool for data architects. Data architects will design and document data assets, and that might include application databases as well as the warehouse as well. It might also be sort of messages in a some sort of integration projects, middleware layer, whatever. So whatever your data asset is, we'll be designing and documenting those data assets. And the process that we use is we're going to use some common business facing models, perhaps an enterprise logical model, which we'll talk about. And that gives us the sort of architectural patterns that we're going to use in our design process for our data assets. It's an enterprise tool, so yep, we've got to operate at scale and use an enterprise approach. And the secondary part of ER Studio is that we can connect with other programs. So data governance is really, really important. We've built integrations with tools like Calibra and Microsoft Purview, which has been incredibly important. So we're seeing a lot more of sort of shifting left on data governance. We want governance sort of thought about right from the get-go. That's really important in the data warehouse. Again, I'll be showing you that during the demo. Okay, so let's talk about the process that we're going to go through. So within ER Studio, there's a straightforward design process. We're going to start from logical models. We're going to talk about the business requirements that we want for any particular asset. The line seems to have moved a bit on there. So I can draw a picture of the data and use business language. So a logical data model. I've got entities here. I've got an entity called customer, one called order, and we can put in the primary keys and what attributes are available. We can then use the tool to generate a physical model that is aligned with the technology that we're going to use, whether it be a JSON file, a database structure, whatever it is. And the physical model will have all sorts of extra stuff in it, which is relevant to that particular technology. Along the way, we'll apply naming standards. So a database probably won't allow you to create a column called customer space identifier. At least I've got to take away the spaces. So we can apply naming standards so we've got consistency across our names. And then from the physical model, we generate our code, great, our DDL, which means that the tool will do that for you. So I don't need to speak the language of our database. So I understand all the DDL code, the tool's going to generate that for me. So first iteration, that's exactly what we do. And then as we want to sort of manage changes, we can make changes to the logical model, agree those changes. Yep, this is what we want the new iteration of our data asset to look like. We can propagate those changes in a controlled way to our physical model, continue some design work on that. We can compare the physical model with the actual database and generate a new set of code, alter scripts, and then changes that data asset. So that's the standard design process that we use in ER Studio. Now, again, the key here is to incorporate the notion of architecture. Same as if you're building a house, you're going to go through that design process going from requirements to deliverables, but we want to reuse standard patterns. Okay, so lots of use cases for where we're going to do this sort of enterprise approach to data. Data warehouse design is just one of them. We might use the same approach for designing our application databases, the integrations between our applications, even just business transformation. So lots of reasons to do this. We're not going to cover this today. We'll focus on the warehouse, but it's all about common reusable definitions of data, those reusable patterns. So the sort of process we go through, we can build an enterprise data model, which might have a conceptual model with the high level concepts, and then we're going to add more detail into it and create an enterprise logical model. So we're going to have a standard understanding of what is a customer across all of our projects. This is a business model, so it's in business language. So we're really understanding what are the master data entities of the organization, the key transaction types, customer and product, master data entities, key transaction type, order. We're talking to the business about what does this all look like. So when we talk about a customer, what's the definition of a customer? What are the important attributes of a customer? Credit rating score. What do we mean by credit rating score? What does the business understand as the definition of a credit rating score? How do we identify a customer? So we're going to use customer identifier. Great, that's how the business identifies a customer. We might also look at alternate keys. How else do we understand and identify a customer? So all of this business knowledge is useful for the design of all of our data assets, and especially useful in our analytics program and our data warehouse. Okay, so model of how the business works. So the sort of process we use, and do excuse all these lines that have zipped all over the place, bless PowerPoint. We can use this enterprise model to design our data assets. So, and this is the process I'm going to be showing you in ER Studio in a moment. So we can pull fragments of this standard common business model and use that to design a new data asset. So somebody says, hey, Jamie, can you build me a relational database for customer and order information? Great. So I can pull entities from the enterprise logical model and use those to start my process, knowing that I'm using consistent language. I've got all these sort of attributes and keys that are consistent across the wider business. Okay, and as I'm pulling these models down, these little universal mappings are created in ER Studio. So I've always got traceability back to that standard model. And then I can generate the physical model from it and then generate the codes. Likewise here, I've got a JSON model and I use the same approach, same logical model. I can generate a physical model that represents a JSON structure. If I've got a COTS package that I want to document, I can reverse engineer that COTS package, create a logical model for it. The language is different in this COTS package. We talk about client rather than customer, but I can map it to my enterprise standard customer. So this is what we're doing all day long when we're designing our data assets, and we can create effectively a data catalog of all of our data assets against a nice, common, consistent logical model, which is really useful for our data warehousing exercise, because we can start to find out, well, where is the data that we need to feed our warehouse? Okay. We can also use this model to train our AI. You're going to see in the roadmap for next year, we're going to have various integrations with tools like Copilot, the ability to export this beautiful business model to an AI to sort of train it to reduce hallucinations. Driving data governance. So traditionally, a data governance data catalog will be consisting of a business glossary, a series of terms, and then a technical data dictionary, all of our physical assets with their technical schemas. Okay, we map them together. With ER Studio, we can introduce the notion of the enterprise logical model. We can even kickstart the governance program, so we can harvest business terms from the enterprise model, creating a nice ontology, and then we can help with this sort of mapping of the business terms. And again, this is really going to help us with our building of our warehouse, and we'll see all this working in a moment. Okay, so the analytics story, the Medallion architecture. Again, sorry about these lines. So the idea is we want a beautiful model of our Medallion architecture. We're going to have our different layers. We're going to have our gold layer arranged into star schemas. We're going to have our silver layer, which has got our well-defined tables and structures inspired by the business and the business model. We're going to have our bronze layer or staging layer, which is really sort of reflecting the source data assets. And as we're saying, we can understand those source data assets in terms of our enterprise model. You'll notice that the three layers of the Medallion architecture all have the same logical model. So the information in each of these three layers logically should be the same. So the sort of process I'm going to show you in ER Studio is that we're going to be reusing the fragments of the enterprise logical model to drive the designs of all of the layers. The silver layer should be really easy peasy. It should reflect pretty much identically the structure of that enterprise logical model. So if we've already got an enterprise logical model, then creation and design of the silver layer should be relatively easy. The star schemas use a different approach, so we'll talk a little bit about how we refactor this third normal form logical model into fact tables and dimensions. Okay. So as mentioned, an Inman style warehouse is pretty much the same sort of structure. Okay. If we had a data vault warehouse, same sort of structure again, but the silver layer is arranged into hubs and links and satellites. Okay, but again, logically, all three of these are absolutely identical. If any of you have got sort of questions or comments on any of that approach, it'd be really interesting to see sort of your view on it. So do fire in some questions into the chat there.
There is one question, Jamie, before you leave that.
Yeah.
How does data product design fit into this and into the design of your data mart or your silver layer?
That is an excellent question, and I think we're going to do sort of more and more webinars on that going forward. I've got a little bit of a sort of a taster on that in the demo, but really the sort of, I think this is a big sort of change that we're seeing with a lot of our customers. Yeah, we're moving from sort of have at it data warehouses where we end up with a swamp of data to something more structured, better architected. So Medallion architecture, data vaults, and Inman style architecture. Great, that's good. But then we've got to think about the outputs of the warehouse. So how do we conceive what star schemas do we want? And this is where sort of data mesh and the data products side of things fits in. And we've got some really exciting conversations going on at the moment with Microsoft Purview and Calibra on this. So both of those tools acting as that sort of data storefront where the business comes along and says, great, this is what I want. The subject matter experts and the domain teams really sort of think about, before we start stuffing things into our data warehouse, let's focus on the outputs. What are the products? We're going to treat data as a product. A product should be something that has value, has a well-formed contract about its usage. We understand its sort of governance policies before we get going. We can go through that design process of taking those woolly requirements for data products, creating a well-formed logical design of that data product, getting that approved before we start any design work or making changes to our warehouse. And as we're creating those logical models for our data products, we're reusing a common palette of entities from our enterprise logical model, which is great because it then gives us consistency across all our products. We might have many products from different domains, all containing customer information, for instance. Using our enterprise logical model as that standard palette for every data product design ensures we've got consistency across all our data products. So this is a great input to us with our Medallion architecture. And now we've got a whole bunch of really nice logical models that we've got to deliver through maybe star schemas in the warehouse that we then got to realize with our silver layer and then source from data assets. Hopefully that answered the question. But again, we'll see a little bit more of that in a moment. In fact, I've got some slides on it. So yeah, data as a product, a domain-based approach and self-service data. So with our sort of data product design, we split the organization into domains. Each domain will have a business glossary and some data product entries. Great. And then we're going to realize that with physical assets. And each of these gray boxes represents a physical asset, which might be a star schema, might be a JSON file in a Kafka streaming service, whatever it is. And the missing piece here is the notion of a contract associated with every data product. So this is where we create a logical model for each of those products before we start realizing it. And the consistency side is using that enterprise model to drive the designs of all our data products. We might use one single enterprise logical model. We might have each domain with its own standardized domain model, and we might be sharing entities between them. Again, we can use ER Studio and its compare merge tools to sort of copy entities across the different domain models. Or we might have a sort of a more complex approach where we've got one enterprise model with stuff that's consistent and common across all domains, and then each domain has its own model. And each data products, we're then pulling from that palette of foundational data products. Okay. Any more questions on the sort of the theory, or should we get into our demo?
Yeah, there are a couple questions, Jamie. One is I'm trying to get to really understanding. It's really the second question there. Since the data has to be traversed in different layers, it's talking about the Medallion approach here. Does that mean it's suitable for business scenarios that involve real-time or time data streaming? And I think that would revolve around the presentation layer.
Well, obviously in this sort of, let me sort of whiz back up. So the time dimension is really important. So one of the benefits of this approach is that both in the staging layer and in the silver layer, we can add that time dimension in. So we can continually load data from source assets into the staging layer at periodic intervals, or even have some sort of change data capture mechanism as things change over here, and we can add that time dimension in. So absolutely a feature of this, and that's a really important part of Data Vault, and we can perhaps again have a look at that later.
Right, and before you leave that, another question coming in at the end there, and I can help answer this. Those green arrows you're seeing on the screen there that are saying ELT or ETL, extract, load and transform, or the other way. Those green arrows are actually something you can model in ER Studio. Jamie will be showing that very soon. It revolves around our visual data lineage tab in Data Architect, which then can be also published up into the ER Studio web portal. So stay tuned for that, because he's going to show you those visual lineage diagrams and how they actually help to tie together these stages.
Beautiful. But the sort of hopefully the story that we're going to see in a moment is we've got a well-formed silver layer where we've got one and only one source of the truth for customer. We might have many, many systems that contains customer information, many, many tables in our staging area, and we're going to, and the complexity probably lies in this green arrow here, sort of getting all that data into that one clean table of customer. Okay, right, let's go look at the demo. Okay, so I'm going to take you through a little bit of a story with Team Server and Data Architects. Team Server is our web front end for the products. This is what integrates with Purview and Calibra. So I might be here as a business user. I'm looking for some data. So what I might do is start browsing through my business glossary, looking for specific pieces of information. So we're going to look for a term called party, which is a pretty vague term. I can read all about the definition of it. I can see a bit more detail, take me through the taxonomy of a party. Okay, I'm looking for information about an employee. Great, so let's go and look at the business term employee. Okay, that's what information is related to an employee. So this business term employee relates to, they hold a contract, have commission payments made to them. That's what I'm looking for. I want some sort of, I want data around commission payments. And specifically, I want the commission payment value. Ah, there it is. Okay, so there's a business term here called commission payment value. So this might be the start of my journey as a business user. And you notice that every one of these business terms has been mapped to Calibra, so I can hop across to Calibra at any point. Hopefully we're, yeah, there it is. I already opened it. Oh, it's logged us out. I thought it might. Cool. So there's the same business term in Calibra, same definition, all the same sort of properties. Okay, I can hop between Team Server and ER Studio and ask different questions in different ways. The data stewards have already said, hey, commission payment value, sensitivity level, this is critical, and it's PII data. Okay, that's something worth knowing about when I'm going through this process. Same information here in Team Server. All right, so I'm a business person. I want commission payment value. Where could it be in terms of my landscape? So here in ER Studio, I can see that I've got 4 models that contains business term commission payment value. And if we expand these, so I can see my enterprise logical model is containing commission payment value. That's good. That's good. I've got a system here, an HR database, salary DB, that's got a column in the table called comval, whatever that is. Okay, so I'm guessing that must be commission payment value there in a physical table. Brilliant. In terms of my analytics program, then here it's telling me there's a data product called employee commissions. And I might be able to find that same data products in Purview or Calibra, all linked into this model. For that data product, I've got a logical model for it, okay, which represents the contract for that data product. It's got an entity called commission payment. Perfect, there it is. I've got 2 physical instantiations of that data product. One's a JSON API, and another one is a star schema. There's a dimension with that same piece of information. I can also come along and see, in my enterprise data warehouse, I've got a logical model for my warehouse, and I've got different layers. There's my silver layer, and there's my gold layer that contains commission payment value. So great. So this is giving me a really sort of nice, easy, business-friendly map on where can I go and find commission payment value. So there's an important journey through Team Server. We can also do things like go to our data catalog and see, hey, I've got various different servers here on different platforms, and I can go and find out about those particular servers and what data lives on them. Okay, there's a particular database here, and I can see all the tables and columns in here. So great, I might want to start from the bottom up. And then the third one is I could go through my data models, going through that sort of enterprise model from a conceptual down to logical, and then where is it in terms of my estate. So Team Server is a really good way for business people to sort of browse through these models. Okay, so how do we build some of these models? Let's go and look at Data Architect. So this is our design tool that we use for building data models. So I've got 4 models open here. The first one is our enterprise logical data model. So the sort of story we're going to try and tell here is that we've had a request for a data product that's going to contain commission payments. So we know from that business term that it lives here in the enterprise logical model in this entity called commission payment. Beautiful, beautiful. So if I want to sort of provide a report to customers with this sort of stuff, then what other entities might I want? I'm probably going to want my employee entity and my order entity. So I've got 3 entities there. So I can use those to drive the design now in my data warehouse. If I am doing the sort of data product design journey, then maybe I can create a model for that data product. And I've copied, using our compare merge tool, those 3 entities into my data product model. And then I could actually sort of realize those as physical models, either as a star schema or a JSON file from that one logical model. So maybe I've got a data model here in our studio that covers everything around that data product. Now we can go to our data warehouse. Let's think about how we're going to realize that data product in our data warehouse. So with ER Studio here, I've got a logical model, and I can arrange that logical model into these different submodels. So again, just going back to the enterprise logical model, you can see these different submodels. I've got one for sales, I've got one for product management, one for HR. Okay, so I can break the organization down nicely into these submodels, and it makes sort of understanding all that complex information much easier. So what I've done here is I've copied parts of the enterprise logical model into the model for our enterprise lakehouse, our Medallion architecture lakehouse. So here again is that sales submodel. So I know that these 3 entities here, employee, commission payment, and order, I want to add those to my warehouse. So I'm going to start off with the gold layer. So I created a logical submodel that's containing those 3 entities. Making these into a star schema is really a refactoring exercise. All this information here, I want it exactly in star schema form. It's just a question of refactoring, which is going to be the sort of fact table in the center and what are going to be the dimensions. So the sort of process I'm going to go through is creating a physical model from it and then refactoring. The nice thing here is that in my logical model, I've got lots of useful knowledge. So this logical order, I can see sort of from whence did it come and where am I using it. So this where used tab is quite useful. So you can see all the logical submodels, quite small on your screen probably, but I can see I've got a universal mapping back to my enterprise logical model. So for traceability, I can modify it in this model, but I can always see its traceability back to the enterprise logical model. And maybe the standard entity in that enterprise logical model might change over time. I can use compare merge to compare my warehouse version of that entity back to the enterprise. So that's a useful tool. You can see that I've got my bronze, gold, silver layers here, all containing this entity. So useful knowledge of where is this data as it exists. The entity itself is really useful. It's got lots of useful business metadata. So against the logical entity, I can see things like the definition for it. I can see its mappings to, if I had one here, business terms in my business glossary. This might have come from Calibra. So it's going to make that link for us. There we go. And for the attributes themselves, there's lots of useful knowledge in here about an order. So I can see that I've got my primary key. So order number is part of the primary key. I could also see that, hey, I've got, as well as the primary key, I've got alternate keys. How else might I identify an order? I can also identify an order by the customer purchase order number and the customer reference number. For our data warehousing, this is really, really useful information. So I want to really understand sort of how do I connect my source data that might have varying keys against that standard definition in our warehouse. We'll see that later. Okay, so there's our logical model for our gold layer. I can then generate a physical model for the gold layer. And you can see I've switched on a the dimensional view, and I can select which of those entities are fact tables, which are dimensions. And the process is really sort of refactoring those entities. And I've got some nice tools in the RStudio to help with that refactoring. So I can select a table, I can choose things like I can split it, I can merge tables together using roll-ups and roll-downs and table merges. So there's lots of tools to help me sort of refactor that third normal form logical model into my star schema. I've got little gadgets like this sort of move tool where I can say, okay, this field over here, I want to either copy it or move it to my junk dimension over there. So there's that paid attribute moved across. So that refactoring exercise is really easy. And then from this this physical model of my star schema, I can then generate the DDL and then publish that to and then create that in the warehouse. So that's the gold layer. The silver layer, same sort of exercise. So this is the information that we wanted to put in our gold layer. I want the same thing in my silver layer. It makes sense. I've got to really. So there's the entities. Life's now really easy. I can just sort of generate this as and create my silver layer, which is remarkably identical to the logical model in its structure. The only thing that I've done is I've applied a naming standard template. In this case, I've used one that says just take away the spaces and give me a camel case naming convention. I could use all sorts of abbreviations if I wanted to. So again, I've created my silver physical model. I could sort of add views and create sort of additional physical things in this model and then generate my DDL. If I wanted to create a data vault version of the silver layer, then again, the tool will really help me. I'm starting from a logical model. I can then generate hubs and links from this. We're just about to release some really nice tools that help with that refactoring process. From a logical entity, I can create a hub. I can create links. The idea being that the core structure of our data vault, the hubs and links, is inspired by that business model. I've got one and only one entity for an employee. Same sort of approach in our enterprise data warehouse. The silver layer, I've got one and only one entity for my employee, and I'm going to attach all my data to that. Okay. So we've been talking about sort of data movements and ETL jobs. So what I can also do is go to my lineage tab, and I can create these sort of models of the data movements. So you can see that I've created, over on the left-hand side, there's some silver tables. Over on the right-hand side, there's my gold tables, these fact tables. What I can do is draw a transformation in the middle and then create data streams between them. This is a sort of a fairly high-level sort of view. I've just selected the input tables and selected the output tables. Within that, I can sort of add sort of definitions in business language of the data movements. I could also create individual transformations column by column and add as much detail as I wanted to, talk about how we're sort of combining fields, we're doing lookups and those sorts of things. Okay. From this sort of high level visual data lineage diagram, we've got macros in the tool that allow you to export this as a Excel spreadsheet, for instance. So you can give this documentation to your ETL engineers to go and build it in the tool of your choice. We do have some customers that have written their own macros that from these diagrams actually generates ETL code. We've also got some tools that will read some ETL tools and create these sorts of diagrams from it. Okay, so we've created our gold tables, we've created our silver tables, we've got the data movements between them. Now we want to source some data. So again, using our really nice model here. So commission payment value, we know where it is in the warehouse now. Where is it at source? So this has given us a clue. It's told us that I've got a salary DB database and there's a table called com payment. Okay, so what we can do is create a physical model of that database. So there it is, there's that table com payment. I might have this in another model. I've put everything into one model just for the demo. There's the physical table, com value. You can notice I've got nice logical names for things. This is all nicely documented for me. Com value is commission value. There it is, and I might even have a nice definition in here for me. Okay, so great. So there's the physical model of my source asset. Next thing I want to do is copy those and create in my staging area. So in my physical model for my staging area, I've got different submodels. And for my salary DB, I made a copy of those same tables. I removed all the primary keys and foreign key constraints. I don't need all of that. We just want the data. The ETL tool is going to load that. We don't need referential integrity. So there's my nicely documented tables in my staging area. And then again, we can create lineage movements and say, hey, from this table in salary DB, that's going to be loaded into, I should say, silver layer. There's my silver EMP employee table. And that's the sort of the basic process that we're going to go through for creating our warehouse. Now, of course, data warehouse is probably going to be pulling data from our data lake. So I was just going to show you how we do that. So I'm just going to hop across to Microsoft Azure. So we've got a data lake in Azure. I've got some Parquet files here in a container in Azure. So what I might want to do is to say, right, we want to create our data warehouse in Databricks, and ER Studio can help us with this process. So I'm going to take the, let's take the user data, which contains data about our employees. Okay, so we can go to Databricks. I can create a container in Databricks. There it is, ERSPM with a URL. Beautiful. So that URL I can then take and go back to ER Studio. So what I want to do is I want to create an external table in my staging area of my Medallion architecture. And I want that external table to pull data from that Parquet file. So here's my table. I've just created this manually in ER Studio. I go to my storage tab. I can say that it's a Parquet table, and that URL that we were just looking at, I can just paste that into the location. Okay, very good. Oops, closed it too soon. Now, as I said, I don't speak SQL, so ER Studio is going to give me the SQL that I need to create this table. There it is. Let's copy that. Okay, and we'll go back to Databricks. Okay, across to Databricks, and I'm going to create a new query in Databricks, and I'm going to run it. Okay, hopefully it will run nicely. Off it goes. Databricks is executing, and it has, any minute now, created for us an external table that's going to be pulling data from that Parquet file. And just to be sure that it has created, there it is, user data, and there's a whole pile of fields. Brilliant. Okay, so we now want to understand that in ER Studio and use it in our model. So I can now go back to ER Studio, that little table there. I can't see all the columns at this point, so let's sort that out. So I can use my compare merge tool, I've mentioned a few times, compare that table that we've just created. I've got a connection to Databricks I've already set up. So it's now going across the wires to Databricks. I can select my catalog main. There it is. Just go and select the correct data set, ERS warehouse staging. Beautiful. Okay. And I can hop through. Okay. So it's now going and reading that external table from Databricks. What just happened there? Oh, there it is. Okay. And there's our user data table. So let's just say we want to merge into current from the database. Cool. There it is. So now ER Studio has gone to Databricks, and it now understands all of the fields from that Parquet file in the external table. Great. So again, like I had with my salary DB section of the staging area, my bronze layer, I've now got a whole bunch of external tables in my lake ingestion part of the staging area. And then the next job is to, hopefully, I've already designed my silver layer to accept that data. So all I've got to do is again go to my visual data lineage, and we're going to find that where is it? Bronze tables, user data, there it is. Drag that in there, and I can create a data stream from there to there, and I can decide which of those fields from my external table I want to put into which columns over in my silver table. There it is, job done. That was a real super speedy whistle-stop tour of external tables with Databricks and using ER Studio for them. Again, what I'm trying to do here is just sort of really give you a taster and a feel for this. If you want to see more detail on how all this is done, we can set up a demonstration afterwards.
Cool. Got a question for you, Jamie. As you were showing the tool and the creation of the DDL there on Databricks, does ER Studio support Git repositories, Git hubs?
That is a really good question, and let's just talk through that. So if I go to any of my layers, let's say the silver layer here, so I've created the physical model. What I generally do now is get the tool to generate the DDL for it. So when I generate the database, so what this is going to do is allow me to output the DDL as a script file. You'll notice there's generate a script file to Git. So what I can do is connect to a Git repository and then commit that DDL. That creates DDL for the entire warehouse to the Git repo. So what I'm going to end up with then is every time I go through this process, I'm now casting a new version of that entire create DDL for the warehouse in Git. What I can also do is then use compare merge and say, okay, I want to compare this physical model of the current version with a previous version of that in Git and generate the alter scripts and then commit the alter script to Git. So that change process is really sort of well thought through with all of this, all connecting into a nice CI/CD pipeline. Thanks, Tim.
A little bit more on data lineage, and I hopefully we answered some of this, but there is some documentation out there on data lineage and how you create the data flows. But maybe you could show that real quick for this individual, just back on your data lineage tab, just how you created that arrow. So with the, from your source to the transformation block, and that's your data stream.
Yeah, so just starting again, I did that pretty speedily last time. So I've dragged in from my palette here the silver table in my enterprise data warehouse. There it is, employee. Okay. We just created that external table for this user data Parquet file, which now exists in Databricks as an external table. I simply just sort of create a transformation object and draw some lines. So from there to there and there to there, and then I can select which are the input columns from my external table. Okay, select a couple of those, select the output columns, and then I could sort of specify things like, is this a calculation or a direct map? I could add a business description of the mapping, any pseudocode that I wanted in there. So I'm really sort of documenting that data movement. We can't actually directly from ER Studio as it is generate the ETL code, but we can generate documentation. As I said, some customers have created little macros that from all this could generate their own ETL code. Did that answer the question, Tim?
Yes, it did. There's a couple other questions. We might go. The data lineage, person's asking if data lineage, the mapping is exportable to Calibra or Purview.
Yeah, good question. Not yet. So we can push to Purview and Calibra the logical and physical models. So Calibra already has, it's already set up to use logical data models. So we can, all of these designs that we've created in ER Studio, we can publish to Calibra and Purview. the documentation, the logical model for a data products we can attach to the data products in Calibra and Purview. In Purview and Calibra, if we've scanned these directly from the database, we can connect our physical model to the scanned version in Calibra or Purview, along with the mappings to the business terms, along with the mappings to the logical model. So no matter which tool we go to, ER Studio or Team Server, we can see the same information, the same model. We're synchronizing between the tools, the business terms. So whether Calibra is the master or ER Studio is the master of the business terms, doesn't matter. We can synchronize them. So the two tools are sort of working in one to document all this. So as you're going through this process, designing and documenting your data warehouse, you can constantly publish this back to Calibra or Purview. But what we can't do is push anything around the data lineage side of things yet. Something we might do in the future, and I'm always keen to hear from you guys, our customers. What do you need us to do? What's important to you? So do let us know.
Okay, just going through some more. I can answer one of these. Can we also bring in views from Databricks? The answer is yes. There, both user views and materialized views. Databricks is a fully supported platform for us.
Yep.
If it's not a platform you currently have in your license, please contact your sales rep. Be happy to do a demo for you, or maybe get that platform added to your Studio license set.
Yeah, there's lots of nice things that we do with Databricks. So you can design sort of managed tables or unmanaged tables. So if this table in the silver layer, you're actually going to persist it as a managed table in Databricks, great. If you're actually going to persist it as a Delta table over in Azure, again, you can do all that in ER Studio. We've done some nice work there. We support features like the partition keys, etc. So really good support for Databricks and the Unity Data Catalog.
There's a last question as we're starting to wrap up our time here a little bit, but this is important. And it's written this way: is Git the only joy mechanism, which is a phrase I haven't used before or heard, to generate, to compare models and generate alter scripts? So the answer there is joy mechanism notwithstanding. We do have many different facilities. Maybe you could open up compare and merge and show all the different compare and merge.
Yeah, compare merge is probably one of the most powerful parts of ER Studio, and I think I showed you in the lake ingestion. So I ran compare merge of a physical table against the live database. So we can compare this model with either another model file. I can compare it with a model file in the repository. I can compare with a SQL file. So I might have from my Databricks a bunch of SQL code, and I can compare this model with that. It'll tell you what the difference is. Or compare it with a file in Git. I think the interesting thing with Git, if I was to compare two DDL files in Git, it would tell me sort of which bits of text are different, but it doesn't really give me a semantic understanding of what the differences are. The great thing about compare merge is that I can sort of compare the two. It'll say, hey, these tables are different. These are the attributes, the properties of those tables that are different. For all the columns in that table, these are the properties that are different. It's a much more powerful way to understand the differences between two things. It's geared up for data and databases, whereas Git isn't.
Okay, and kind of a last question, I think this is just how we presented this for you today. But the question is a recommended practice to have all three models for all the layers in the same project? And I can take a stab at answering that one. You know, it's going to depend on your project largely. Jamie showed you this today for ease of presentation. Typically, what we're seeing is maybe a different model for each or models for your different areas within the Medallion architecture. And this is the important bit that Jamie was showing you earlier, that's all tied into your enterprise logical data model, your enterprise data model at that level to ensure consistency across the layers. So that's what we typically see.
Yeah, I mean, the product is intended to be sort of working at scale. So it's intended to work with very large models. Performance is always better when the models are sort of smaller and more manageable. So as Tim said, what I've done is I've got one logical model, and then each layer in the Medallion architecture has got its own physical model. What I could do is exactly as I had it in, whiz back up, whoops, next one, as I've got here. Each layer has its own project model, its own DM1 file, and I've used compare merge to copy that same logical model to each. That's fine as well, and you create these universal mappings as you go through, which gives you that sort of traceability back to the enterprise model. And Team Server will allow you to sort of navigate these universal mappings graphically to say, hey, this entity in the enterprise model, which DM1s contain it and where is it? So you've got lots of different options there.
So probably our last question, and it's good we have our product manager on the call here today regarding Databricks, since it's quickly evolving, as is almost every other platform. How does Studio keep up with all the updates and features that they might be pushing out?
That's a great question. We try and sort of make changes preemptively. We talk to the product teams over at the database vendors and find out what's coming out, and try and sort of do preemptive strikes, adding in the new features before they're requested. Some of the time we have to sort of make a call, which features of the products do we support, and wait for our customers to ask us sort of the extra stuff. So if you're an existing customer and something's important to you, fire in those support tickets. We do review them, we read them. The more customers that request a feature, the higher the priority becomes. We don't always get it right, but we really do try hard.
Probably last question. I'll go ahead and answer these two, and we'll start wrapping up here. As I think you saw in our webinar here today, the question was, can ERS only be used with the physical levels and layers of your Medallion architecture? And the answer is no. You're going to have that at both the logical and physical, where your physical implementations or instantiations are going to change based upon your platform. Clearly, your logical model is where you're going to tie in that logical layer into your ELDM to have the consistency across the layers of definition, as Jamie showed. What is a customer? What is an order across all the layers? So you're going to be modeling both at the logical and the physical layer.
And it's really important as well. So having that business view of your data, having that common model that drives all of your data projects is vital. So this is the difference between design and architecture. Yeah, I can design my silver layer in isolation. I can design my star schemas in isolation, but having that enterprise logical model that gives us the consistency across the different layers, understands the sort of interoperability, makes sure that everything is well documented, gives us really good business metadata. So here we saw sort of order. We can see the business primary key for an order, its order number, and that would have told us that it's managed by our CRM system. And then there's alternate keys for an order. All useful stuff when we're making decisions on designing things in our warehouse. Gives us that consistency.
Absolutely. So last question, are you going to get share the PowerPoint? You will get an email if you've registered and attended this, so you will get an email that has those links. It also has a link to the recording. I want to say also, if you have seen anything that you would like to demonstrate or learn more about, please contact the sales at Idea and get your sales rep and account manager involved. The solution architect staff will be happy to give you a demonstration and dig into what your individual use cases might be to help you better utilize the tool. With that, I think, unless you had anything last minute, Jamie, yep, there you go. So thanks. There's a little QR code if you want to scan that in. On behalf of Jamie and the Idea Studio Solution Architecture team, I'd like to thank you for joining the webinar today, and I hope you all have a very nice day. Bye.
Great. Thanks, everybody.